Hola class, how we doing? We are in the co-creation of value module for the semester. In the 12 plus years since I've taught this course, maybe the middle of those 12 years, this module used to be the final module for the semester. We built all the way up through the semester, and we ended with co-creation of value. To me, co-creation of value was the academic-y kind of a way to talk about this Web 2.0 thing that was building up. Like the Web 2.0 word was the practitioner word, and co-creation of value was the academic word or term. But really, we're talking about the same kind of a thing here. Good questions, solid articles. Of course, I have book recommendations over here because I can't do one of these videos without flashing books up, right? So here we go. We're starting off with the second article here, and this is Ramaswamy, okay? Now, he, along with C.K. Prahalad, were the guys that kind of came up with this co-creation of value stuff. The 2000 article, which we couldn't get our hands on, there was a problem with the file. This co-opting customer experience, this is kind of where it kind of started here. This co-creation of value dialogue. And then these two authors published a very, very influential book in 2004. And it just so happens why the academics were talking about co-creation of value. You remember our timeline, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, was the birth of the Web 2.0 world with all the social networking, where the crowd really started to get built. Okay, so questions. Has co-creation become more prevalent since the writing of this article? Absolutely, positively, yes. It's around us every day. We are in an on-demand world. An on-demand, bottom-up world doesn't happen without co-creation. What companies provide current examples of succeeding in co-creation? Look, we had tons of examples in the using crowd as an innovation partner, but specifically the community-powered problem solving. These articles are littered with examples. It's a lazy question here. Look, right here. BSF, Credit, FedEx, General Electric, yada, 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 yada. Heck, Volvo built a car with their community. In a world where uncertainty is the only certainty, how do you create a flexible strategy? Well, let's talk about this in terms of a non-flexible strategy. Non-flexible strategy is, here's the top-down plan. This is step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. You can only go in this order. You can't deviate. We don't do any feedback or evaluation until we're done step 5. It must take 30 months. That is a non-flexible strategy. A more flexible strategy when you're dealing with uncertainty is huddling up. More like an NFL football mentality. Your goal is to go 10 yards. You may or may not get that 10 yards in 4 plays. But each time you huddle up, see what you need to do, see how the competitive environment around you is trying to play against you, see what opportunities you can exploit, and you go forward. You may get a 50-yard play. You may get a 5-yard play. But each time you huddle up, you go forward. That is a more flexible strategy. What are the downsides to co-creation? This is a solid question. I'm glad someone asked it up front. I think the big downsides to co-creation is time. Top-down can happen quickly. Bottom-up in co-creation cannot. It really can't. It really cannot. It's not a speed thing. It could be quicker after you have the, where's this one article here? know what your customers want to know before they do? I know it's the next article here down here, but the holy trinity of everything that we've been talking about all semester, we need information technology, we need data gathering, and we need analytics. It's right here. Whether we're talking about CRM, whether we're talking about mass customization, whether we're talking about co-creation of value, whether we're talking about bottom-up branding, whether we're talking about anything that we've talked about this semester, you need the holy trinity: information technology, data gathering, and analytics. Now, if your firm already has the crowd organized, a culture external with the crowd, a culture internal with the crowd, we already have our information technology set up, we already have our data gathering set up, and we've already been testing multiple algorithms, okay, then co-creation of value is not as slow as you might think. But it takes a while for an Amazon to become an Amazon, an eBay to become an eBay. You know, I think a very good example is Apple Maps. Apple Maps, when it came out of the gate in, I don't know, I think we're in year 4 now, or 5. It was terrible. It was flat out terrible. Why? Because they did not have a crowd inputting data to the systems. You guys don't remember when Google Maps came out. But when Google Maps came out, it was also very terrible. The difference was we had nothing to compare it against. Maybe MapQuest. And even MapQuest wasn't all that great. We were just so enthralled that we could, look at this, a digital map. And we didn't see the downsides of the digital map and the weaknesses of the digital map. But Google Maps became very, very, very good. So when Apple had to start, you were comparing Apple Maps to Google Maps. Google Maps had 8 years of data already inputted into their algorithms. Of course it was going to be superior. You know. The other downsides to co-creation is, you have to stay the course. It's pretty tough to have a complete top-down and bottom-up organization at the same time. If you're going to go with co-creation, it's tough to, give it a timeout at any given time. Your crowd will go bananas, and you could lose the crowd if you do that. When Orange received its 93,000 ideas on their blog on how to improve, how can a company decide which ideas are more valuable than others? Do they choose by what the majority says or by what the company thinks are good ideas? Yes and yes. It's not just what the majority says, right? It's not just what the company thinks. That's the co-creation of value. It's an iteration process. What you do is you see the big buckets of thoughts. Let's just say of the 93,000 ideas, okay? Let's just say 110 categories came out of those 93,000 ideas. They were grouped into, let's say 100 buckets. Let's pick a round number, 100 buckets. Of those 100 buckets, 15 of the 100 buckets received 80% of all the 93,000 ideas. Well, then you dive deep into those 15 buckets. You at least start rolling thoughts and ideas out with those 15 buckets. It's not all or nothing. It's not all at once. The other cool thing about this co-creation of value thing, crowd, company, is that you can do one, iterate, continue with that, add another, do something with it, iterate, continue with that. It's a system as opposed to a process. Why do companies still believe in their products if the customers don't care? Shouldn't that information be the entire basis of the product line? Ooh, that's interesting. So, do you mean that the customers don't have a passion for it? You mean that the customers aren't, What do we mean by don't care? Is there no information gathering from the customers? or the customers are apathetic. Why are they apathetic? It's because whatever they say, the company doesn't listen, or it's just not a high involvement product class. I mean, given the culture that we live in a bottom-up world. There's very few things that people don't voice off about. It doesn't need to be as passionate as, I don't know, something that could be front page of CNN or Mashable or Huffington Post, but somebody cares. There's some community. And with information technology that we have now, with social media that we have now, the community could be as small as 100. The community could be as small as one person. And we have the technology to deal with just one person. Segments of one to one, mass customization to one. What are the ways that small business can implement co-creation of value? Well, look, we have something as simple as marketing research. If you think about a reason to do something like this, co-creation of value, it could be for simple purposes of marketing research. Marketing research is a strategic reason to do co-creation of value. Innovation is a strategic reason to do co-creation of value. Small businesses can dialogue with their small community and come up with additional ways to add value. Tell people what's in it for them. If there's something in it for them, they care. If there's nothing in it for them, they don't care. What are some of the downsides to allowing stakeholders to co-create? Well, time. 2, stakeholders might be asking for something that either technologically, financially, operationally, the firm can't do yet or at all. That is a problem. You know, I want a Tesla vehicle that costs $25,000 and I get 500 miles per charge. Financially and technologically, that doesn't exist. And it can exist. You know. In the article, I would have liked to see an example where co-creation didn't work. Are you aware of any good examples of it backfiring? Well, we just go back to the mass customization lecture that we had. I mean, for all intents and purposes, mass customization is co-creation of value. Right? Levi's had a monster faux pas. You know? Question. Can co-creation of value have a downside with many ideas being shot down by the group or in light of other ideas? I think I kind of answered this question when we were hitting on this one. All right, we got a lot to do, so I'm going to move on. Solid article. These guys got the co-creation of value train leaving. Okay? Know what your customers want before they do. Wow. Now, that is the title of an article. This is exactly the kind of stuff we've been talking about all semester. And by the way, this is a December 2011 article. This was really 2010, 2011, and 2012 is when these types of conversations really started to form. Because even though we talk about the Web 2.0 or beginning in 2004, it really wasn't until 08 to 10 before it really caught on. We see seeds of it in 04, 05, 06, 07, right? But it really wasn't until 08, 09, 10. And then it really caught on, and then we started seeing higher level thinking of it within 2011, 12, 13. By 13, 14, and 15, this is commonly accepted practice to the point where if you don't do it and you are in certain industries, you're in trouble. Love this article. Especially love this thing that I already showed you on page 84 at the bottom. The starting state affairs are changing. Advances in the holy trinity of information technology, data gathering, and analytics. Woo! Okay, let's answer some questions. This seems like a mindset that you would like your sales force to have. Ooh, you're talking about a sales force. However, it could be very mentally strenuous and have all your salespeople to think much differently from how they typically approach business. What practices would you introduce to encourage this types of thought and analytic process? All right, being that I'm a sales guy and half of the stuff that I've published in my life involves sales forces, co-creation of value with a sales force is very difficult. Why? Because salespeople have short-term goals. Salespeople have short-term motivations. Salespeople, their jobs, their managers, the cycle is all short-term. That's the challenging part. You have to take the Salesforce salespeople mentality out of this equation. You can still have someone be in charge of revenue generation, but they can't have a Salesforce schedule, a Salesforce salary, Salesforce commission plan, No. That doesn't work. That doesn't work. It needs to be more of a co-creation of value, customer relationship management type position. And in the process of doing that over time, the firm will generate more money, like what a salesperson would do. But salespeople tend to have clients, products, closing deals, right? The innovation, creation, that's usually not part of the Salesforce process. That's challenging. What type now? We can start talking about these next best offers, okay? Now, digitally, with information, with CRM, a Salesforce could, we've talked about before, cross-selling, upselling, seeing that in a CRM system that someone really likes product A, but seeing how product B could complement it. Okay, that's stuff that a Salesforce and a salespeople could do, co-creation of value-wise. What types of legal or regulatory boundaries are currently in place that limit a company's collection of data? Okay, in the United States, we've already had this conversation. Little to no. Zero. Nada. You click that agree. You click that terms of service. And in the U.S., there really is little to no protections of privacy. Little to no. I keep mentioning that documentary, Terms and Conditions May Apply. It's on Netflix, Amazon Prime, YouTube. Look it up. It'll scare the bejesus out of it. And there's even a cameo by Mark Zuckerberg. Isn't tracking customers via locations settings stalker-ish? Well, it's stalker-ish if they don't know you are tracking them. If you opt in and say, yes, allow, you can track me, then why is it stalkerish? I want to know where the closest Wawa is. Well, unless I opt in and say, yes, allow geolocations or whatever that thing is that pops up on our screen, then guess what? It's not stalkerish. We are agreeing to it. We want that convenience to know where the next Starbucks is, or the next Wawa is, or the next gas station is. I want to know. Why don't customers care about that? Well, they do care about that, but they prefer the convenience over the stalkerish stuff. When someone's following down the street, you're not agreeing to them following down the street. When you opt into a service on your phone, it's in your settings that you allow for geolocation services. Guess what? It's not stalking anymore. You're allowing it. And to be honest with you, as long as someone provides you serious benefits to geolocation services, you're going to agree to it. Otherwise, it would have been front page CNN News, Mashable, RE Code, New York Times. No one's complaining about it. Go to Twitter and try to search for something like this and see someone complaining about it. No matter what type of marketing is being used, does it usually come down to building relationships? It's all relationships. We saw this in the you know, the premature death of relationship marketing, that kind of thing. Those articles, the second week of the second CRM module, which talked about the downsides to CRM, it is all relationships. A relationship is a two-way street. If you have a two-way street, you have the ability for co-creation of value. How can a small company increase interest in their customers to participate in the next best offer? Well, you give them something that they care about. You're not just giving them any random offer. You're giving them something that's really to value of them based on the knowledge that you gain through the data collecting, through their loyalty card, their social stream, information that the client customer provided to the firm. How do you think that future government regulation on user privacy rights will render this method obsolete? I don't think there's going to be any future government regulation. If there hasn't been any now, I really don't see it coming anytime in the near future. I mean, Google and Facebook and trying to think of who else. They spend millions and millions and millions of dollars. Google is number one on lobbying in Washington. They do what big oil does and what big tobacco does, and guess what? They are some of the largest contributors to political senators, representatives. In the United States, I do not see anything changing anytime soon, anytime in the near future. I really don't. What percentage of companies do you estimate currently use next best offers, and with the growing trend of data analytics, what do you expect this number to increase to? Well, I think the better question is how many companies or what percentage are really good at this? How many are doing it? It's a very high number. I would say of the Fortune 500, we're talking about 60, 70, 80%. I mean, the ones that aren't doing it are ones that are like industrialized products. When we're talking about aircrafts, when we're talking about oil, when we're talking about, commodities, you don't need that. But when you talk about consumer products, when you're talking about like high frequency, high volume products, NBO is, it's like 9 out of 10 do it. Seriously. What percentage do it well? That's a good question. I've always said a low number, between 5 and 10%. I think we're actually getting closer to it actually being a bona fide double-digit number. But for every Amazon or for every eBay or for every CVS, there's 100 companies that really just vis-a-vis CRM collect data and spam you. They only push with the technology. There's no relationship building. The only way you get good NBOs is with very good data collection, very good analytics, and very good back and forth relationship. How do companies within the same industry always have similar rules around creating NBOs? No, I really don't think they do. I don't. I think there isn't any rules. I don't think there is any. No, I really don't. All right. Using the crowd as an innovation partner. I mean, if you want to talk about crowdsourcing or you want to talk about the crowd, I mean, we are in a Web 2.0 world. In a Web 2.0 world, if you ignore the crowd, there are penalties. There are problems. There are issues. There are challenges. If anything, if there's only one takeaway this entire semester, tattoo it to the front side of your forehead and say, do not ignore the crowd. How's that? Innovation, research, R&D, these are all spectacular reasons to use the crowd. This is a solid article. When's this one? 2013. When we're starting to get to the height, or at least higher momentum of conversation. This is really well done. I mean, on page 64, wow. When and how to crowdsource. This is a very, very nice page here. Contests, collaborative communities, complementers, labor markets. I've used Mechanical Turk, Amazon's Mechanical Turk, which is a crowdsourced labor market, to collect marketing research. And I've published papers using data that has been crowdsourced. Questions? I think a large barrier is that people don't want to admit that they don't have the next big idea when reaching out to the crowd, especially in a hierarchical culture. Are there any current examples where this has been embraced by culture to develop new product in place instead of an R&D department? I mean, heck, P&G switched in the 2000s where they decided to get 50% of all their innovation from outside the corporation. I mean, P&G was the new product development innovation machine for decades. And they had a CEO, Lafferty, I don't know, can't say his name really well. He said 2 books. 50% of the major ideas that P&G developed were developed outside the walls of Cincinnati, Ohio, by either professors or research labs. The Mr. Clean Magic Erasers, yeah, that's right, you used that. Guess what? That was an R&D professor dude, I think Tokyo? The Swifter? Yeah, you used that too. That was an R&D lab in Massachusetts. I think Newton, Massachusetts. The labor markets doesn't seem applicable to crowdsourcing as do the other 3 categories. I completely disagree. Perhaps this is because it seems just like shortening the complexity of hiring contractors rather than becoming a source of insight and information. How do you think the labor market fits? Freelancers? I mean, you want to talk about photography? You know, no one has an in-house photographer anymore, right? When was the last time someone had an in-house photographer? I mean, some of us in this conversation are going to grow up in a world where you're going to work for firm Dr. Dano, insert your own name in the name of your firm, and you are going to be a constant freelancer. And you are going to be part of some kind of Amazon Turk, and guess what? That's how you get your jobs and your income. You will be a permanent freelancer your entire life. You know, the idea of going to a corporation and working, you're going to be the corporation. And through markets like Amazon Turk or other types of things, there are, some of us are reading the crowdsourcing book. That crowdsourcing book has at least 4, 5, or 6 different applications of the labor markets alone. It's going to happen. You're going to end up working for a large corporation, such as Pepsi or Mars, and you will not be an employee of that corporation. But you will provide services to that corporation, and they will provide you, right? And your health care, you're on your own. Your retirement, you're on your own. All your benefits package, you're on your own. I mean, look at Uber, right? Uber is the largest taxi company in the world that doesn't own any cars. Airbnb is the largest hotel, rental, whatever you want to call it, in the world. They own no real estate. I can't make this stuff up. How does a company identify which crowdsourcing method would fit their needs and initiate the process? It depends on their, what is your goal? What is your purpose? Depending on your purpose, if you need more Uber drivers, you're not having a contest. R&D is better through a community than it is through the labor market. Figure out what your goal is and execute on that goal. How can we say that running a contest is like hiring as many people to work on a specific project? Well, they're different goals. Running a contest, i.e., all the Doritos Super Bowl ads in the last couple years have been crowdsourced. That is kind of running a contest. That's not a labor market. They're different things. Again, I'm going back to page 64. Is crowdsourcing a correct way of marketing these days? Well, if you have a product that is a crowd type of product, any social network is a crowd type of product. Guess what? You have no choice. Now, Coca-Cola or Verizon or AT&T, okay, that's kind of different. That's not completely 100% crowdsourced the way a social network is. I mean, Facebook is nothing without the crowd. eBay does nothing without buyers and sellers. Wikipedia would have no entries without the crowd. So for those types of businesses, they're 100% in the bottom-up world. There are firms and things, if you want to draw a continuum, 100% in the bottom-up world, 0% in the bottom world. Wikipedia, the U.S. government. I think that's pretty much how you do it. You can't get more top-down than the U.S. government, right? Which is why we had that article on the bottom. Why don't more large corporations take advantage of the crowd the way startups, let's fix this, do? Because it's hard, and it takes time, and if you have the wrong culture at your firm, i.e. it being too top-down, it's going to be very painful. If you don't have the knowledge to do it, if you don't have the technology, the information gathering, the analytics, this is not something where you go to the store, or you go to a conference, and you pull, an idea out and you implement it over the weekend. It's hard. Think about it. We've been talking about this stuff all semester, and to be honest with you, April 5th, according to my calendar down here, it's April 5th. It's probably just starting to make sense now. Right? I have yet to see Pepsi or something on Kickstarter or crowdfunding projects. Well, Pepsi's a top-down consumer organization, maybe in the advertising and the promo kind of thing, but from an innovation standpoint, we already saw a Gatorade example earlier this semester with Pepsi using the crowd as part of the process. And Tom brought that in, if I'm not mistaken. Kickstarter, yeah. What are some of the ways that already established companies can take advantage of the crowds? All right, we already have that. This is on the page. Lazy question. Didn't need to ask that one. Are there any other industries where crowdsourcing would not work? All right. Very, very good. Very good question. There are certain scenarios where the crowd doesn't work. Okay? It usually tends to involve either government, official, legal, some kind of medical regulation. The more regulation that exists, the harder it is for crowdsourcing to go there. For instance, the legal field, you may be able to crowdsource within the labor side of the equation, but laws are laws. Changing laws are difficult. The requirements to become an attorney, the law school, the bar exams, the local bar exams, the CLE credits, these are all in the Porter's 5 Forces model. These are all restrictions that limit entry. Okay? These are examples where crowdsourcing are limited. Medical doctor, FDA regulation, approval, clinical trials, that is very difficult to crowdsource. There are legal requirements. There are government restrictions. There are things along those lines, When you look at Uber, what's the whole storyline with Uber? Whether they can get around the unions or not, or whether the union's strong enough in a certain city. In San Francisco, where the labor unions, where this was founded and started, and the labor unions aren't strong, there's no problem. Uber operates in Philadelphia, but not legally. That's a whole conversation right there, right? Question 1. The collaborative model example of IBM and Apache seems like it could have been done in-house by IBM. Maybe. When you think about the number of people involved, this was all that they would be able to do within IBM. And at work, you can't just work on one thing. Why couldn't IBM just throw a bunch of ears at Apache at the problem? Well, the problem is it's not a bunch of engineers. A crowd of 2,000 is smarter than 20 engineers. It's a scientific fact that the crowd is smarter than geniuses. 3 geniuses is not smarter than a crowd of 2,000. It's mathematically improbable. In other words, why are the people willing to do things for free so much more qualified than IBM employees? Is it just because they use Apache? Doesn't IBM have to? Okay, let's go off on this tangent. This is, for the lack of a better term, the Old Testament of the Web 2.0 world. And even though this was originally published in 2000, there's not one internet firm or example in this 300-page book here. But this is one of the foundations of the idea of crowd. We're going to have another question coming up, which is why this book and a couple of other books that I have here are sitting handy. But basically, this is statistical probability. This is regression. This is the bell curve, okay? And 1, 2, or 3 people cannot be smarter than a crowd. It's just mathematically and scientifically, as long as all the assumptions, which the assumptions are diversity of opinion, interdependence, decentralization, and aggregation. As long as those 4 conditions are met, the crowd is always smarter. I'm going to tell you right now that the diversity of opinion and interdependence, these are things that tend to be violated in the Web 2.0 world, meaning that these 2 assumptions are not met, meaning that the crowd is more dumb than it should be. I'm going to stop there and hold the rest of it for later because you have questions there. What are truly differentiates crowdsourcing from having a good cohesive team on a project with Well, there's just not enough diversity on a good cohesive team. Okay? There isn't. I mean, a perfect example is this thing. Okay? This is my toy of the year. I'm having a lot of fun with this thing. I think it's cool. It's not a must-have yet, but it's a lot of fun. I'm surprised it hasn't told me to stand since we started recording, but I'm sure I'm going to get a beep in a minute or two. All right? Now, Apple has very bright people there, but the community of developers outside of Apple are the ones that take this thing to the next level. Apple can do a very good job of a 1.0 product. This is a 1.0 product, but this is not to the sophistication of this thing yet, right? And most of the best things from this were ideas or thoughts that came from outside of Apple, like apps. All Apple did was provide the community for the app. They gave you the App Store, but it was the community that put all the good stuff for the damn phone. I mean, hypothetically speaking, swipe left and look at your top apps and your top usage, or go into settings and go into general and then usage, accessibility, self about, accessibility, I don't know, somewhere in here. And you can see how much battery use is for each device or each function on your phone, and you're going to see that 80 to 90% of the things that you do on this device were not created by Apple. Right? All right. Awesome article. Community problem solving. Okay. In a B2B world where customers often say they want to co-create but really want to do the easier task of dictating what you want them to make, how do you get into a co-creation mindset? Well, in many cases, the dictating what they think they want, they may think they want something, but you have the ability to make it much, much, much better than what they think they want. That's where you add value to the conversation. They may want X, but if you can give them XX, then guess what? It's sort of like a give and take, where in a B2B world, a customer says they want something, and you say, no problem, let's talk about that something. And I have about 4 or 5 different ways to take what you thought you wanted into a whole nother level. How do you get them into a co-creation of mindset? It's simple. You over-promise. No. What's the excuse? You over-deliver in value. They're asking for X, and you give them X cubed. They want something, and for the same price, you give them X cubed. Then all of a sudden, they're going to start dialoguing with you even more. Because you listened, you were empathetic, you have the data stream, you understand about their clients and their customers, and you know how to give them something beyond what they're asking for. How does a co-creation system usually have a defined completion, or do companies benefit from having indefinite community consistent feedback? Have a defined completion? Alright, so this is a question that seems to be asking about the flow of communication, the back and forth. I like to think about co-creation of value in terms of batch processing. It's a continual overall flow, but usually it's done in batches where information comes in, co-create, move on to the next thing. It's done in a batch. It's done in a bunch, and then you move on, and then and you move on, and it's done and you move on. It's hard because when you do co-creation of value, you have to have the back and forth. You have to have the relationship. If we think about the previous example, you have a customer, they ask for something, they dictate it, you go back with them, yes, well, we heard what you said, we're going to make this. You go and do a trial, you iterate once more, you put it into the marketplace, you gather more information, you find ways to improve, you come up with the 2.0 version of it, you put it into the marketplace, you find information to improve, you come up with the 3-point information version of it. It's a constant process that's done in batches. I think that's a good way to summarize that. If two companies are in competition, but they both have attributes that can help their competitors, would they help each other so both of them can improve on their own way? All right. I don't know how to answer this question. They're in competition with each other, but how much do they help with each other? Well, maybe the term you can think about this is in terms of the popular Silicon Valley phrase is frenemies, friends that are enemies. I mean, Samsung makes, or at least manufactures, they don't design, because Apple designs, most of the chips for their devices. Samsung is one of their lead suppliers. It's also their main competitor. Right? Apple is moving to all kinds of cloud services. Yes. And recently, I'm trying to remember that they're moving away from all Google to all Microsoft for cloud hosting. If I'm not mistaken, I think I have that story correct. I mean, both Google and Microsoft are competitors to Apple, yet they're... Or maybe Apple's moving away from Amazon and moving to Azure and Microsoft. It's one of those kind of things. Frenemies. How's that for a new term for the day? What types of skills are needed in order for co-creation of value to work? We've been talking about this all semester. We're okay there. What types of strategies for allowing diverse people to collaborate even though they may not see eye to eye? Well, we're going to get to this, making dumb groups smart, but what happens in social media, this is the weaknesses of the main weakness of the Web 2.0 world. When someone tweets something, or when something gets out of control on Facebook, on Twitter, within a blog, we get to the mob rules mentality. This is an old expression for something that's happening even more now virally. Okay. And what happens is they are violating one of the principles of the wisdom of crowds, the science that makes this work. Specifically, people's opinions are not determined by the opinions, people's interdependence, which is the assumption. People's opinions are not determined by the opinions of those around them. In other words, everyone should be able to have their own opinion and input that opinion into the crowd without being influenced by other people's opinions. That's what makes the crowd smart. If the crowd has the ability for mob rule, or for someone who's so influential to influence too many members of the crowd, and they'll just do a shortcut, or they'll be predictably irrational and will follow someone who's influential and just will forward tweet, etc., or whatever the most popular person in the community says, you have no problems with diversity if everyone can stay independent and private, and they can contribute by. Here's another way to think about it. Co-creation of value is even stronger when, in a batch mentality format, the crowd all puts in their opinion, but puts in their opinion independently. And then after all the opinion is inputted, then the scoreboard or the leaderboard or the crowd cloud or the tag cloud then pops up. But if you go to a website and you want to put in your opinion and you already see what the top 10 topics are, guess what? You can't think beyond those top 10 topics because you're so primed to only think about what the top 10 things are, then guess what? There's no interdependence in the crowd. You allow for more diversity if you allow for more interdependence in individual thinking and inputting of the information. This is a major fundamental flaw that 9.99 out of 10 Web 2.0 digital firms violate. And even when I talk about it to these firms, they still have no idea what I'm talking about. Spectacular book. Spectacular book. Spectacular book. Is there a problem size that's too big or too small that's got to be applied to co-creation? No. This article talks about a very large scale problems where there's constituent groups that are geographically spread out. It seems like they can be applied to so much more small. No. It used in the Web 1.0 world and the pre-Web world. there was a problem with scale, and there was a problem with, group size. Information technology has solved all that problems. We have segments of one. We have customers of one. There's 7 billion people on the planet. There could be 7 billion different groups. We have the information technology to handle groups of 1 or 2 worldwide, globally. Geographically dispersed, language, cultural, ethnicity, all of it. See, that's what was missing. That we really have only had really well for about 10 to 12 years on the high side in the history of mankind. Okay? We've only been able to do this because we now have the tools to do it. This was question 1 of our case, was it not? Wasn't this question 1? We need to culturally be able to take care of this, and we need, to be able to do this. We needed the technology to be able to do it. Without the culture of the bottom-up world and without the technology of the bottom-up world, we can't do car sharing. We can't do Airbnb. We can't do eBay. We can't do Wikipedia. We can't do Amazon. We can't do eBay. We can't do any of it. Can you have too big of a problem or too... No. I don't think so. I really don't. Progress update. I've been standing for 9 of 12 hours. Fan. No, I don't think so. No, I really don't. I really don't. I really don't. I really don't. I don't. Okay. Making dumb groups smarter. All right. Groups can be dumb. There's no question that a group can be done. Which, by the way, this was written by Sunstein, who's the other half of this book, Richard Thaler, Nudge. Love this book. Classic. Really, 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 really awesome. This isn't necessarily a straight crowd or a group book, but it's a way to get individuals, This is like cousins, these 2 books here. Love these. Dan Ariely, Predictably Irrational, Nudge. These are behavioral economics. These are social psychology books. And you can use these types of techniques to get someone to do something better for their own behalf without them realizing they're doing it. These are really good books related to the summer class I'm teaching, the psychology of persuasion. So Sunstein's awesome. I found the group polarization section very interesting in light of today's political environment. How much does the internet and 24-hour news... we wouldn't have the polarization we have today without this. We really wouldn't. And here we are violating interdependence. We're not having our own opinion. Where we have Fox on one side, MSNBC on the other side, who knows what the heck CNN does in the middle. But guess what? They have opinions. They are biased from the outset. It's sort of like going to Boston and expecting to hear fair and balanced coverage about the New York Yankees. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. You wouldn't be in Boston if that was the case, right? You would have less group polarization if the co-creation of value process was able to be done interdependently, as I explained earlier. Can establishing contrarian teams at times have an effect of slowing down progress in group decision makings? No. No, because one of the other assumptions is diversity of opinion. You need the devil's advocate and you need the contrarian teams because the larger base of diversity of opinion, the smarter the answer will be in the end. That's the bell curve. The more data in the curve, the wider the tails are on that curve, the better the answer will be. I would have liked more information about the role of leaders within group dynamics. Whoever asked this question thumbs up to you. Do you think one leader within a small group or a large group can drastically change the outcome of a decision-making process? Absolutely, positively, yes. You could have an ex-leader who's just so authoritarian that they, in a top-down process, decide what a large or small group would do. Or you could have a coach, pedagogue, mentor, rabbi who's more why and more bottom-up that could dramatically influence what a small or a large group would do. Absolutely, positively. We cannot ignore the role of leaders. Now, even with interdependence and even with people shoving all their opinions into a decision, okay, the leader still does some of the marshaling, still some of the sorting, still some of the algorithm tweaking. You still need leaders. Which is why we spent a whole weekend on it before we left for Easter break. Leadership is a fundamental part of this equation throughout the semester. How can a large group have a negative impact on a company? Easy. The large group could be disorganized. The large group could not come to consensus. The large group could slow down innovation. The large group can stick their feet in the mud. I mean, you guys have all been in organizations where the top has made a decision, they expect everyone to follow that decision, and nothing happens. Nothing happens. 4 offsites and 2 years later, they realize that, no one on the front line is really implementing what we've talked about 2 years ago. Is large group decision making a good idea? Yes, I've been talking about it for the last hour. Are there any other major corporations allowed for group decisions? Yes, we've had multiple bazillions of... God, there's too many examples in these articles. How do you strategically appoint a devil's advocate as stated in the article? Wait for it. You ask the crowd who should be the devil's advocate. You know, there are certain influential people within the crowd, and guess what? You can easily pick out, people that are sharp, on the point, and can represent a diversity of opinion. It's not that hard to do. How can you openly encourage your counterpoints not to fear a penalty in this fast-paced world? That's culture within your firm, There's no other way to... There are some firms that if you make a mistake, you just, empty out your desk and you leave. There are other firms that reward you for risk-taking behavior. What is the best way to extract an individual's diverse knowledge? You ask them for it. It could be as simple as an app on their phone where they're constantly just keying in opinions. You ask them for it in a systematic way. From your experience, what are the group decision errors you see mostly seen? It's the 4 that keep violating. This is the question that I keep asking. Most importantly, people's opinions should not be determined by the opinions of those around them. Mob rules is bad for group decision making. Okay, Machinery of Hope. I remember having a subscription to Rolling Stone when I used to commute on a train. Now I listen to podcasts. And I was teaching this class this was spring of 2008, in the run-up to the 2008 election. And in January-ish, the New Yorker ran this 12-page New Yorker article on now President Obama. I really didn't know who this individual was. And I was like, holy Christmas. I didn't know the backstory. I didn't know him about smoking weed. I didn't know any of that stuff. How the heck was this guy going to become president? And then I read this article in Rolling Stone. And everything that's in this article is everything that we've been talking about all semester. And I was just like, holy Christmas. This was something to get excited about. I mean, look at the front page and just the front page. This is your campaign. It's not our campaign. Huh? What? The next page. In the process, the Obama campaign has shattered the top-down, command and control, broadcast TV model that dominated American politics since the 1960s. They have taken a bottom-up campaign and absolutely perfected it. It's light years ahead of where they were 4 years ago. They'll have 100,000 people in a state who have signed up on their website and put their zip code in. Now, paid organizers get in touch with people at precinct level to help them build the organization from bottom up. That has never happened before. It was never possible before. Now, I'll be perfectly clear. Politics is not my thing. I'm not a big fan of politics. I'm not a member of either political party. Last thing I want to do is give my money away to people in Washington. I will agree that I do tend to lean in the direction of President Obama. I did vote for him twice, but I am by no means a political junkie. I'm not a member of these political parties. So to me, here's a situation where the bottom-up world, if it can start happening in politics, it can start happening outside of politics. Now I'm going to get to a caveat in a second. Some of the questions here get to that. One advantage of running a political campaign is there is a finish line, a voting day. How effective is this method when there's no end project? It's very effective. There's always an end project. Just because there isn't a November 4th election day doesn't mean there isn't a how many products did you sell that quarter? How many products did you sell by year end? How much market share did you gain vis-a-vis your competition? There are still goal key performing indicators, KPIs. Whether it's a voting day or whether it's some other kind of marketing KPI, they're still there. Using a bottom-up approach is shown to be effective, but those driving progress from the bottom do not see any tangible outcomes until election day. How does one keep motivation high throughout the whole process? Well, if it's their campaign, if in... where's the other quote? Soul Lovers Mugus for Obama, it's like, he gave them the seats at the table to become their own players. We don't tell them what to do. They decide their own. Camp Obama, My Beau, all this stuff. If you decide what the campaign is, then it's your campaign in support of President Obama. But when you take ownership of it and it becomes you, it's part of your identity, that's how the motivation is high. Then it's not about motivating someone else to help you out. You're motivating someone else as part of their own identity process. You know, how do you motivate a Red Sox fan? You don't have to motivate a Red Sox fan. Red Sox fans are already motivated. It's because they believe it's Red Sox Nation in New England. You don't have to motivate anybody there. If negative publicity is bad, then why is Trump campaign flourishing on all the negative media coverage? Well, this negative publicity is bad world is gone. You know, it used to be the adage that any publicity is good publicity. All right. The negative media coverage, you know, the positive, the variance of negative versus positive, is not what it was as it is in the past. There's so many conversations out there that any one single conversation cannot cut through all the other conversations. So while if some's negative, if some's positive, no. Is it safe to say that there'll be more coverage and popularity the more voters you will get? I don't want to be too simplistic here. I really don't. But the more influence that you have, the more voters you will get. I don't know if coverage, this is the problem that I have. It's not just coverage. It's not just coverage. It's influence within the messaging. We have another question coming up like this. Did the Obamas persuade the voters to vote for him? No. Was it all marketing? No. It was a cultural worldview, a process. When you have voters in Texas deciding what the campaign will be, and the voters in Texas are deciding what resonates within the Texas borders, is that marketing? No. Did the Obama administration tell people to vote for him? No. The Obama administration, both of his campaigns for the 2008 election and the 2012 election were very, very well done in a bottom-up world. My problem is I gotta hit pause. Okay. Sorry, that was a long pause. Didn't mean for it to be a long pause. I think I already answered this question here. We're good. No, it wasn't all marketing. Do you agree with the statement that a top-down campaign will no longer be successful? It feels like both Trump, Clinton, and Cruz have mixed equal parts top and bottom-up approach at most, with none of them going as far as Obama did in 2008. Sanders seems to be the only candidate who's taken more extreme theory Y approach, more bottom-up. I'm going to answer this one and this one together. To what extent do you think the current presidency candidates have applied what Obama did 8 years ago? See, here's what's different. This was 2008, and in 2008, they actually had to be more bottom-up in 2008 because the tools didn't exist. Meaning, Facebook of 2008 was not Facebook of 2015-16. Twitter of 2008 was not Twitter of 2015 and 16. You know, he had to build this from scratch. The downside of him building MyBo from scratch is, you know, when he became president in January of 2009, MyBo went poof. The whole machine that they built was a one-off, blah, yeah, zoom, disappeared. Now, President Obama, which was the comment that I was getting to this before I got interrupted. I am much more enamored with candidate Obama than I am with President Obama. President Obama was fine. Candidate Obama was awesome. Right? Yeah. Yes. And the problem is that in government, a pure bottom-up candidate Obama approach with a Supreme Court, with a House of Representatives, with senators, especially if you don't control both the House and the Senate, you can't have a pure community bottom-up in a top-down world like Washington. He actually, it may be hard to remember, but we had the major financial crisis, but 2009, 2010, 2011, they were rough years for Obama in Washington because his mindset that he had, the community organizer, the bottom-up world, he tried. He really tried to bring that to Washington. And oh my God, did the Senate, did the House, did everyone just completely... So what I think presidential candidates have, this question, is they don't have to build their own network like they did have to do the MyBo 8 years ago. You know, Trump, last time I checked, he's Twitter and Twitter only, and that's all he needs. She has a more comprehensive Facebook plan. She's been out to Facebook corporate a couple of times. I have no idea what he's doing. I really don't. I'm not paying attention close enough. But they have the ability to stay more on message and to be more hierarchical, okay, with components of bottom up. He's straight top down. she's still pretty top down. He's very top down. And even Sanders is more top down than not. Sanders isn't anything like this. You know? I don't know if anyone's ever going to be like this again. We'll see. We'll see. Hope that was fun. Hope we enjoyed it. If you have any questions, shoot me messages. And I'm out.